The endless void of space stretched silently, broken only by the faint shimmer of distant stars. The Zoranth Collective's patrol fleet cruised along the edge of their claimed territory, their ships sleek and elegant, crafted with the precision of a species that had long considered itself the peak of civilization. For centuries, the Zoranth had seen themselves as guardians of order in the galaxy. Their vessels, designed for beauty as much as function, glided effortlessly through the darkness, their crews confident, their commanders sure of their dominance. The patrol had been uneventful for weeks. The stars were quiet, the space lanes calm, and the surrounding systems loyal to the collective. It was the kind of stillness that lulled even the most disciplined officer into complacency. But that calm was broken when the long-range scanners detected something unusual, a single ship. At first glance, it seemed insignificant, just one massive vessel drifting near the border of uncharted space. Its design was unlike anything the Zoranth had encountered before. Where their ships were curved and gleaming, polished like jewels in the dark, this one was hard-edged, blocky, and heavily armored. It lacked the grace of Zoranth engineering. To many of the officers, it looked primitive, almost crude, as if its builders cared nothing for beauty or elegance. On the bridge of the flagship Zoranth Radiance, Commander Velon leaned forward in his chair, his crest of silver spines glinting under the light of the command deck, his compound eyes focused on the holographic projection of the vessel. "What do we make of this?" Velon asked, his tone calm but curious. His science officer, Lyran, adjusted the sensors, her long fingers dancing across the console. "The vessel is strange. Its energy readings are faint. Shield signatures are irregular. It does not match any database records. By all appearances, it is outdated, primitive even. Yet," she hesitated, her voice carrying an unusual edge, "it is larger than most of our cruisers, and heavily armored." Several of the junior officers laughed softly. One muttered, "Perhaps it is a relic from a failed species, an empty shell drifting in forgotten space." Their amusement spread across the deck, but Velon did not laugh. His instincts, honed by years of command, told him that appearances were often deceiving. "Run a standard scan. Let us see what hides behind those thick plates." The order was carried out immediately. The ship's sensors pulsed out beams of invisible energy, brushing against the strange vessel in the distance. On the monitors, the alien ship remained still, its hull catching the faint glow of a nearby star. The first scan came back blank. "Interference?" Velon asked, narrowing his eyes. Lyran frowned, adjusting the calibration. "Not interference, Commander. Resistance, the readings are being scrambled. Our instruments cannot penetrate beyond the outer hull." That answer made the bridge go silent. Zoranth scanners were among the most advanced in the galaxy. No known civilization could block their deep-spectrum probes. Even the great powers of the galactic core could not hide from them. For this vessel, an unknown craft drifting alone at the border of uncharted space to resist a scan, was unsettling. "Try again," Velon ordered. The second scan was stronger, more focused. The consoles hummed as streams of data attempted to pierce the vessel's secrets. For a moment, the projection wavered and a flood of static burst across the monitors. Several officers recoiled, covering their ears as shrill noise pierced the deck. Then silence. The result was the same. No clear readings. "This should not be possible," Lyran whispered. Her voice trembled, though she tried to hide it. "It is as if the ship is rejecting us." The younger officers began to murmur, unease creeping through their ranks. They had faced pirate fleets and rebellious systems, but this felt different. An unknown vessel that resisted their most advanced tools carried an air of quiet menace. Velon rose from his chair and approached the projection. The ship hovered in holographic detail, a mountain of metal bristling with unfamiliar structures. Its lines were brutal, functional. It had none of the artistry the Zoranth considered essential in design. It looked like it had been forged not for pride or glory, but for one singular purpose: survival. The commander folded his hands behind his back. "Do not underestimate the unknown," he said, his voice steady but firm. "What seems primitive may be more dangerous than we imagine. There is strength in simplicity, in function without vanity." His words hung heavy in the room. The crew watched as the strange vessel drifted slowly across their displays, a silent beast moving through the stars. It did not change course. It did not send signals. It simply moved, steady and unstoppable, as if it had no need to acknowledge the presence of others. "Shall we hail them?" an officer asked cautiously. Valen considered the suggestion. Contact could provide answers, but it could also invite risk. He shook his head. "Not yet. First we learn what we can. Prepare a deep quantum scan. Push our instruments to full capacity. I want to see what lies inside that fortress." The crew obeyed. Systems powered up across the fleet, energy surging through the scanners. The projection of the vessel grew sharper as waves of data washed over it. The Zoranth expected to finally uncover the ship's secrets, engines, weapons, crew. But what returned was not clarity, it was terror. The consoles flickered, streams of unreadable data rushing across the screens. The ship's systems resisted again, but this time the scanners forced their way deeper. For a few seconds, the Zoranth caught glimpses of what lay beneath the armor, thick plating upon plating, layered compartments built to withstand unimaginable force. Entire sections devoted not to comfort, but to redundancy, reactors, power grids, life support systems stacked in 3s and 4s, each one capable of running the vessel alone. And behind it all, a shadow of something greater. Weapons. So many weapons. The bridge crew stared as the readings scrolled across their displays. Massive rail cannons enough to shatter asteroids. Warheads with power levels beyond anything the Zoranth had ever encountered. Point defense systems layered in webs across the hull. Not delicate energy beams, not sophisticated disruptors, but raw, overwhelming firepower. The science officer's hands shook. "Commander, this is not a relic. This is not primitive. This is a warship." Valen's spine stiffened, his instincts screaming the truth. He could see it now. The crew design was not a failure of imagination. It was intent. Every line, every angle, every weapon was crafted with a single thought: to survive and to destroy. And yet, even as fear rippled across his crew, the vessel remained silent. It made no move to attack. It did not turn toward them. It simply moved through the void, patient and steady. But the Zoranth knew. They had stumbled upon something ancient and terrible. A ship not designed for beauty or diplomacy, but for war without end. Valen lowered his voice, almost a whisper. "Find out who built it, and pray we never meet them." Part 2. The Scantha warship drifted through the dark like a silent mountain of steel, its massive form casting a shadow across the stars. To the Zoranth collective fleet, it was both fascinating and unsettling. Commander Valen stood on the bridge of the Zoranth Radiance, his compound eyes fixed on the shimmering projection before him. The first scans had revealed little but resistance, a kind of stubborn silence from the unknown vessel. Yet what fragments of data had leaked through were enough to shake the confidence of even the proudest officer. Armor thicker than anything in Zoranth records. Compartments layered with redundant systems. Hints of terrible weaponry hidden beneath its crude angular shell. And still the ship gave no signal. No greeting, no warning. It simply continued forward, steady, unbothered. Commander Valen's voice cut through the tense air. "We begin the deep quantum scan. This time there will be no surface glances. I want everything. Its core, its design, its secrets. If this is an enemy, we must know it. If it is a relic, we must understand why it was made." The crew obeyed with silent determination. On the main console, Science Officer Liren prepared the sequence. Her slender hands moved quickly, but there was no hiding the unease in her posture. She had served on many missions, had dissected alien vessels before, but never had a ship resisted her so stubbornly. Energy surged through the fleet's scanners. Waves of data wrapped around the human warship like invisible threads, reaching into every layer of its structure. At first, the resistance returned. Floods of static, scrambled echoes, incomplete signals. But the Zoranth technology was powerful. Slowly, piece by piece, the data began to unravel, and what it revealed was terrifying. "Look at this," Liren whispered, her eyes wide as the first layers appeared. Armor plating, 4 layers thick at minimum. Not energy shields, not reflective barriers, but solid metal. Compressed alloys. Their density is beyond reason. This ship is not meant to avoid fire. It is meant to absorb it. One of the junior officers scoffed, trying to mask his nerves. "Who builds like this?" "It is barbaric. No finesse, no elegance. They must have wasted resources for centuries to construct such a thing." But another officer leaned closer to his screen, his mandibles twitching nervously. "No, don't you see? This is design born of necessity. They built this because they expected to be hit. They expected to be attacked again and again. This is not a waste. This is preparation." The bridge grew quiet. The deeper the scans went, the more unsettling the discoveries became. Entire sections of the ship were not dedicated to crew quarters or research labs, as the Zoranth were accustomed to, but to redundant life support systems. Multiple oxygen recyclers, backup water purification, rows upon rows of emergency storage units. "It is a vessel built to survive isolation," Liren said softly, her voice heavy with realization. Even if half this ship were destroyed, it would still function. Even if entire decks were torn apart, the crew could endure. "This is not only a warship, it is a lifeboat meant to fight until the last." The words hung in the air, filling the bridge with a cold weight. Then came the weapons. The scan pierced deeper, and the consoles lit up with alarming readings. Gigantic railguns, their barrels running along the length of the hull, each one capable of firing projectiles at such speed that even a planetary shield could not withstand the impact. Missile silos lined the flanks, filled with warheads that pulsed with destructive potential. Nuclear signatures, fission, fusion, and even experimental designs the Zoranth had abandoned centuries ago for being too destructive. Not delicate beams, not precise disruptors, but raw, overwhelming force. "This is not strategy," one officer muttered, his voice shaking. "This is annihilation." Another console chirped, revealing automated defense turrets layered across the hull like the spines of a beast. Dozens, hundreds of them, overlapping arcs of fire, designed to shred anything that came too close. Fighters, drones, even incoming projectiles, all would be torn apart. Liren's voice trembled as she read the data. "Every weapon we see has a backup. Every system has another behind it. Even if one railgun fails, two more stand ready. Even if a turret is destroyed, a dozen more cover its field." Commander Valen remained silent, but his mind was racing. He had commanded warships his entire life, studied fleets from every corner of the galaxy, but never had he seen such ruthless efficiency. The Zoranth prized elegance, precision strikes, and strategic superiority. But this ship was different. It was not built to win wars with grace. It was built to survive them at any cost. As the scan went further, the bridge lights flickered. For a moment, the ship itself seemed to resist, as though the alien vessel were aware of being probed. The data stream wavered, then resumed, but something about the interruption left a shiver crawling across every officer's skin. "Commander," Liren's voice was almost a whisper now, "I think we should stop. The ship, it feels alive." Valen turned toward her, his expression calm but firm. "Machines do not feel. Data does not resist. Continue the scan." Reluctantly, Liren obeyed. The next flood of data made her freeze. Her eyes widened, her hands stiff over the console. "Report," Valen demanded. "There are weapons. Large enough to destroy moons," she said. "Not energy bombardment, not subtle destruction, but kinetic strikes. Projectiles hurled at such velocity that entire worlds could be scarred. And more, nuclear payloads, hundreds of them. Entire reserves of mass destruction." The bridge went still. Some officers whispered in disbelief. Others simply stared, unable to process the numbers. Valen's voice was low. "Why would anyone build such power? Against what enemy?" No one answered. The silence was broken by another alert. A fresh line of data streamed across the console, and Liren's mandibles tightened. "There are compartments filled with unknown devices, weapons we cannot identify. The signatures are unstable, dangerous. This ship is armed with technology both old and experimental. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is forbidden." The tension on the bridge thickened. The officers looked at one another, their earlier arrogance gone, replaced with quiet fear. "This ship is not a relic," one officer whispered. "It is a monster." For the first time in his career, Commander Valen felt the weight of uncertainty pressing against him. The Zoranth Collective prided itself on being the most advanced, the most refined. But this warship, this crude, brutal vessel, seemed like the embodiment of something far more terrifying than refinement. It was the embodiment of desperation, of a species that had faced annihilation again and again, and chosen not only to endure, but to fight harder every time. The scans revealed one last piece of data before the systems burned out, unable to handle the strain. The ship's engines, they were old-fashioned by Zoranth standards, Fusion drives, heavy reactors, primitive propulsion. Yet their power was immense, designed not for elegance but for raw thrust, enough to move the armored giant across vast distances without pause. When the readings ended, the bridge was filled with silence once more. The officers sat frozen, staring at the holographic projection of the ship. Commander Vaylon exhaled slowly, his voice steady, though his spines quivered with unease. This is no relic. This is no mistake. This is a warship built with a purpose. And what purpose is that? Lyran asked softly. Vaylon's eyes fixed on the vessel drifting steadily through the dark, silent and unyielding. To endure, to destroy, to win. The warship moved on, unaware, or perhaps uncaring, that it had been scanned. And for the first time in generations, the Zaranth collective felt the stirrings of fear. The alien warship drifted forward, silent as the grave, yet brimming with a quiet menace that filled the bridge of the Zaranth radiance with dread. The first scans had already revealed armor thicker than reason, weapons that could tear apart moons, and engines that defied all expectations. But the next step of the deep scan reached further, into the very heart of the vessel. For the first time, the Zaranth collective would glimpse the living beings who commanded such a terrifying machine. Commander Vaylon stood tall at the center of the bridge, his spines shimmering faintly in the low light. His officers sat tense at their stations, their eyes fixed on the streams of data flowing across the consoles. Push deeper, Vaylon ordered. His voice carried calm authority, though even he felt unease gnawing inside. I want to know who commands this fortress. Science Officer Lyran adjusted the scanning arrays, her long fingers moving cautiously over the glowing keys. Engaging biosignature sweep, she said softly, locking onto life signs. The air on the bridge grew heavier as the results began to appear. Dozens, hundreds of life forms. Not the thousands that might crew a Zaranth capital ship of equal size. Not the crowded legions of servants or automated drones. Instead, this massive vessel was run by a relatively small number of beings. Yet every one of them radiated something unusual. These are not fragile organics, Lyran said, her voice low. Look at their readings. Dense muscle fibers, reinforced bone structures. Their lungs are adaptable, their circulation efficient. Their very biology screams resilience. The projection on the screen shifted, forming ghostly silhouettes of the crew. They looked vaguely like the Zaranth, bipedal, upright, with 2 arms and a head. But there the similarity ended. Their forms were rougher, more solid, built not for grace but for endurance. One officer whispered, "They look primitive." But as the biosignature data grew clearer, even the skeptics began to falter. These beings have endured countless wounds, Lyran continued, her eyes wide with disbelief. Scars in their tissue, healed fractures in their bones. Many of them carry signs of past injuries that should have ended their lives. Yet they survived. They are not fragile. They are stubborn. They refuse to die. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. In Zaranth culture, injury was rare, almost unthinkable. Their advanced medicine and safe worlds had erased most dangers. But here was a species that seemed forged in fire, shaped by struggle. Vaylon leaned closer to the projection, studying the faint outlines of the beings. And what do they call themselves? Lyran hesitated, then activated a translation program, piecing together fragments from the warship's exposed databanks. For long moments, the bridge was silent as the system worked. Then a single word appeared across the display. Humans. The sound of it echoed in the minds of the Zaranth officers, strange and heavy. Humans, Vaylon repeated, testing the word. It felt solid like the beings themselves. So these are the builders of this fortress. The scan continued, revealing more unsettling truths. The humans were not surrounded by luxury. Their quarters were plain, functional, almost Spartan. Every room served a purpose. Training spaces lined the decks, filled with equipment to strengthen their already powerful bodies. Mess halls contained simple but efficient meals designed for endurance, not pleasure. Medical bays overflowed with supplies, not because the humans avoided injury, but because they expected it. They live as soldiers, one officer said quietly. Every one of them. The data stream shifted, revealing fragments of the warship's history logs. Old files, recordings, battle reports, glimpses into the lives of the crew. The Zoranth officers watched in silence as images flickered across the projection. They saw humans fighting wars on their homeworld. Battles across oceans, deserts, and frozen mountains, struggles against enemies both human and alien, explosions, gunfire, chaos, and yet through it all the humans endured. One recording showed a group of them carrying their wounded comrades through fire, refusing to leave anyone behind. Another displayed soldiers standing against impossible odds, outnumbered and outgunned yet still advancing. "These are not creatures of peace," Liren whispered, her voice trembling. "Their history is war. Endless war." A silence fell over the bridge. Even the younger officers who had once laughed at the strange vessel were pale now. They could not deny what they saw. These humans were not reckless barbarians nor mindless savages. They were something far worse, something far stronger. They were survivors. The scan dug deeper, revealing the command structure of the ship. The officers were not machines, nor were they distant figures sitting in safety. They were present, living among their crew, leading by example. Orders were given with urgency and precision, but every decision came from flesh and blood, not artificial intelligence. The Zoranth found this deeply unsettling. Their own fleets relied heavily on machines for calculations and battle management. To trust one's instincts above flawless logic seemed foolish, yet the humans did so without hesitation. They trusted themselves more than any computer. Why would they reject machines? An officer asked, bewildered. "Because they believe their will is stronger," Vaylon answered quietly. He had seen enough to understand. These humans had no need to surrender control. They believed in their own judgment, their own courage, and perhaps disturbingly, they were right. Another fragment of data scrolled across the console. Liren gasped softly as she read it. "Commander, their species has faced near extinction more than once. Natural disasters, wars, plagues. Yet every time they survived. They rebuilt. They grew stronger." The word sent a chill across the bridge. The Zoranth had flourished in peace, expanding under the safety of their advanced technology, but these humans had been forged in hardship, their strength tempered by struggle. "This warship," Vaylon murmured, staring at the silent giant on the screen, "is not just a machine. It is the history of their kind made metal. Every scar they carry, every war they fought, it is written in this ship." The crew shifted uneasily, their earlier arrogance now replaced by quiet fear. "They are not explorers," Liren said, almost to herself. "They are survivors who turned survival into power." For long minutes, the bridge was silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the Zoranth ship as it drifted alongside the human warship, still unnoticed, still unacknowledged. Finally, one young officer broke the silence. "Commander, should we not retreat? If these humans built one such ship, there may be more. Entire fleets of them." The thought hung heavy in the air. Vaylon's spines lifted slightly, betraying the tension he tried to suppress. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he studied the projection of the humans one last time. Their scarred bodies, their resilient minds, their relentless will. "No," he said at last. "We do not retreat, not yet. Knowledge is our weapon, and we must learn everything. But mark this well. If these humans are as dangerous as they appear, then the galaxy is not ready for them." The officers exchanged uneasy glances, but none dared argue. The human warship continued on its path, silent and steady. Its crew, these strange beings called humans, moved inside, training, repairing, preparing, always ready for the next battle. And the Zoranth collective watched in silence, the seeds of fear growing in their hearts. For they now understood. The most dangerous weapon on that warship was not its armor, nor its cannons, nor its missiles. It was the crew. The alien bridge remained tense, almost unbearably so. The Zoranth collective had uncovered truth that unsettled even the most experienced officers. The human warship was no ordinary vessel. Its armor was unbreakable, its weapons devastating, and its engines capable of moving it across vast distances without pause. But the final scan, the deeper investigation into the vessel's heart, revealed something even more astonishing. The humans themselves were not merely inhabitants. They were the lifeblood, the force that made this ship a true instrument of power. Commander Vaylon watched the projection of the human crew on his console, his compound eyes narrowing. They moved efficiently through the corridors. But it was not just skill he saw, it was determination, a level of focus that made even the proud Zoranth feel small. Science Officer Lyran spoke softly, almost reverently. "Commander, look at them. Even their gestures are precise, but there's something different. A confidence in survival, a will to endure at any cost." Valen nodded. "Yes. And it is this will, more than the metal or the weapons, that makes this ship so formidable. This is a vessel designed around a species that refuses to fail, that refuses to be destroyed." The data revealed logs, mission reports, and battle simulations stored within the warship's AI core. The Zoranth had expected to find calculations, automated commands, machine learning, and controlled precision. Instead, the core was different. It recorded human decisions, every major choice, every tactical maneuver, every emergency protocol, bore the imprint of human thought. "They control their ship, even its AI," Lyran noted, awe and fear mixing in her voice. "This is unprecedented. They trust themselves above machines. Their decisions are instantaneous yet coordinated. They predict outcomes, but they also adapt, rapidly, without hesitation." Valen's spine stiffened as he studied the simulation of a recent battle. It showed the human warship evading attacks, conserving its energy, deploying countermeasures, and simultaneously striking with devastating precision. The humans had done all of this without relying on an automated fleet or external guidance. Their instincts were lethal. Their decisions were perfect because they were human, not machine. "Commander," another officer said quietly, his voice trembling, "if a single ship like this exists, imagine the scale of their civilization, their fleets, their worlds. They could be unstoppable." Valen shook his head slowly. "We do not yet know their scale, but we do know their capability. This one warship alone has survived situations that would have destroyed any Zoranth cruiser 10 times its size. Its crew has endured conditions that would have wiped out an entire squadron of our soldiers. And yet they thrive." Lyran continued scrolling through the data, uncovering more history logs. Each one told the story of resilience. Humans fighting on barren planets, braving deadly storms, surviving environmental disasters, and rebuilding after catastrophic wars. Their technology was practical, often crude yet effective beyond expectation. Every battle, every hardship had honed their instincts. "They are not merely survivors," she whispered. "They are evolving through adversity. Each generation grows stronger, smarter, more capable. They adapt to challenges no other species could endure." The weight of the revelation settled over the bridge like a dense fog. The Zoranth prided themselves on their refinement, their elegance, their ability to dominate through intelligence and technological superiority. And yet, here was a species that by sheer willpower had transformed adversity into power. They had no refinement, little grace, but what they lacked in elegance, they made up for with raw capability, endurance, and adaptability. Valen tapped a console thoughtfully. "This changes everything. The humans do not merely build warships, they build extensions of themselves. Their ships are reflections of their species' spirit. Survival, resistance, indomitable will." One of the junior officers, who had been silent since the scan began, spoke up hesitantly. "But, Commander, they are alone, aren't they? Surely one warship cannot be representative of their entire species." Valen considered the question. Perhaps, but even a single ship tells a story. The level of design, the redundancy, the human-centered systems. It all speaks to a civilization that expects to face the impossible and still endure. "That is a warning, even if they are alone," Lyran added quietly. "And the logs suggest they are not alone. The mission records reference other vessels, other crews, coordination between them. A fleet, perhaps. But we have no data beyond this ship." The commander exhaled slowly. He felt a rare stirring of fear, a sensation he had rarely encountered in his long career. Not fear of weapons, not fear of tactics, but fear of a species whose very essence was a weapon. Humans were not merely technology. They were determination made flesh. Valen turned to his officers. "Prepare a full report for the Council. Include everything we have observed. The armor, the weapons, the engines, the crew, their biology, their instincts, their tactics. This is a species unlike any other. They do not fear. They do not surrender, and they are capable of unimaginable endurance." The officers nodded silently, each of them grappling with the implications. The projection of the human warship glimmered in the center of the bridge, still moving steadily through the void, untouched, unaware of the scrutiny it faced. As the council report prepared itself, Lyran noticed something else, a subtle pattern in the logs. The humans did not merely react. They anticipated. Every maneuver they made in battle seemed guided not only by knowledge, but by instinct, sharpened through generations of survival. They could predict outcomes, calculate risks, and yet improvise when needed. It is their instincts, Lyran whispered, more to herself than anyone else. They have turned experience into foresight. They are not bound by technology. They are their own greatest weapon. Vaylin watched silently, understanding the full gravity of her words. The Zoranth had prided themselves on precision, on efficiency, on control. Their greatest strength had always been their technology. And yet these humans made technology almost secondary. Their strength was them, their intelligence, their courage, their refusal to fail. One of the senior officers leaned closer, his voice trembling. "Commander, if they are like this, if every human is capable of this level of resilience, we may have underestimated them. Entirely." Vaylon's eyes reflected the projection of the ship. Underestimation is a luxury we can no longer afford. Humanity is not a species to be measured by our old standards. They are unpredictable, powerful, dangerous, and above all, alive. Alive in a way that makes every calculation of theirs unreliable. The room grew silent as the weight of the realization settled. The humans were not a threat that could be easily predicted, outmaneuvered, or destroyed. They were adaptive, relentless, and unyielding. And as the Zoranth watched the warship move steadily through the void, an unspoken truth filled every officer's mind. Humanity was not merely a species. It was a force. Lyran finally broke the silence. "Commander, what do we do now?" Vaylon's spines lifted slightly, a subtle sign of deep thought. "We observe, we learn, we prepare, but most importantly, we respect them. If we are to face humanity, it will not be with arrogance or assumption. It will be with knowledge, because one thing is clear, this ship is a warning. Not a threat, not yet, but a warning. They survive. They endure. And if provoked, they will fight." The crew absorbed his words in silence. The projection of the human warship glimmered softly, untouched and unaware of the alien eyes upon it. It carried the history of a species, their determination etched into every plate, every engine, every weapon, every corridor. And for the first time, the Zoranth understood the truth. The humans were not just another species in the galaxy. They were something else entirely, something the stars themselves had forged in fire, something that refused to be destroyed. Vaylon finally stepped back from the console, his mind heavy with the weight of the realization. "Send this report to the High Council," he said. "Every word, every detail. Humanity is formidable, and the galaxy may not be ready for them." The crew worked in silence, the projection of the human warship moving steadily onward, and as it drifted across the darkness, the Zoranth officers could not shake the same thought. This was no ordinary ship, no ordinary crew. Humanity was a species born to survive, to endure, to fight, and to terrify those who dared to underestimate them. The Zoranth collective bridge was quiet, almost too quiet. The scans, the logs, the data, they had revealed truths that none of the officers could ignore. The human warship had shown them the full measure of its power, its massive armor, overwhelming weaponry, and engines capable of moving it across countless light years. But it was the humans themselves, the crew, that weighed most heavily on their minds. Commander Vaylon stood near the central console, his spines stiff with tension. Every officer on his bridge felt it, the lingering sense of unease that came not from machines or energy signatures, but from a species that embodied resilience, adaptability, and unyielding determination. "They are not like any species we have encountered," Lyran whispered almost to herself. "Not their ships, not their weapons, but them. They are alive in a way that defies calculation." Vaylon's eyes stayed fixed on the holographic projection of the human vessel. The ship glided forward silently, massive and indifferent, a fortress of steel and human will. He could almost sense the confidence of its crew, their steady routines, their unwavering vigilance. These humans did not panic, did not hesitate, and yet they were aware, always aware. One of the junior officers finally spoke. "Commander, should we take action?" We have the power to strike first, to destroy the ship before it becomes a threat. Valen shook his head slowly. Do not underestimate what we cannot fully measure. We have seen the ship, yes, but we have only glimpsed its crew, and we have not measured their resolve, their adaptability, their ability to endure the impossible. The young officer swallowed, realizing the weight of the words. Humanity was not a calculable threat. It was a variable beyond prediction, a force that could turn survival itself into weaponry. The Council of Officers debated quietly. Some argued that the humans were alone, that the warship's strength was isolated. Others warned that even one human vessel capable of surviving annihilation meant the potential for entire fleets, entire worlds, hardened by the same unbreakable spirit. Commander Valen finally raised a hand. We do not attack. We do not retreat. We watch, we record, and we prepare. For one thing is certain, humanity is a species we cannot ignore, a species we cannot underestimate. Their strength is not only in their technology, but in themselves. Liren's fingers trembled slightly as she accessed deeper logs from the human ship. Names of past battles, mission reports, and survival stories scrolled across the screens. The humans had faced overwhelming odds countless times. Their victories were not perfect and their losses were heavy. Yet they endured every challenge, every catastrophe, and emerged stronger. Every lesson they learn becomes a weapon, Liren said softly. Every failure teaches them resilience. They grow from adversity unlike any species I have studied. Valen nodded, his spines reflecting the soft light of the bridge. That is the core of their power. They are unpredictable, they adapt, and they endure. It is not merely their warship that terrifies us, it is them. The human vessel suddenly shifted course. It had been moving steadily, indifferent to the alien observers, but now it turned slightly, its engines glowing faintly with the immense energy required for acceleration. The Zoranth officers leaned forward, tense. Had they been detected? Had the humans sensed their presence? Liren scanned frantically. No signal detected. No transmission. No attempt at communication. They are simply moving, with purpose. The silence stretched across the bridge, thick and heavy. The humans had not acknowledged the Zoranth fleet, yet their movements radiated confidence, as if they were aware of every potential threat and had already accounted for it. The very calmness of the vessel sent shivers through every officer. Valen spoke finally, his voice low and measured. This is what we feared. The humans do not need to fight yet. Their presence alone is enough to unsettle any who dare oppose them. They are patient, deliberate, and prepared. And if provoked... The rest of his sentence hung unspoken. All present understood the meaning. Humanity, with its history of survival against impossible odds, would not hesitate. And any attempt to destroy them would be met with consequences far beyond expectation. As the human warship disappeared slightly into the distance, the projection on the main console flickered with fragments of their internal logs. The Zoranth officers glimpsed human routines, maintenance crews repairing engines, officers training in combat drills, medics preparing for potential injuries. Every action was purposeful. Every individual contributed to the strength of the whole. They are self-sufficient, one officer murmured. They do not rely on machines. They do not rely on numbers. They rely on themselves. Valen's eyes glinted with a mixture of respect and fear, and that is why they terrify us. Not their weapons, not their armor, but their spirit. Their refusal to surrender. Their willingness to endure and overcome challenges that would break any other species. The Council of Officers convened immediately. The report that Valen sent to the High Council detailed everything. The armor, the weapons, the engines, and above all, the humans themselves. Every officer was instructed to include their impressions, their fear, their astonishment at the resilience and ingenuity of the species before them. The High Council would read the report and understand a truth that none had anticipated. Humans were a species beyond measure, beyond prediction. To underestimate them would be folly. To engage them recklessly could be catastrophic. As the Zoranth fleet prepared to withdraw from the immediate observation zone, Commander Valen took one last look at the projection. The human warship drifted steadily onward, unconcerned with the alien fleet nearby. Its presence alone was a warning, a signal of what humanity had endured, what it had become, and what it could achieve. Liren's voice broke the silence. Commander, if they knew we scanned them, could we survive? Valen's gaze remained fixed on the projection. Perhaps not. But it is not the weapons that make them dangerous. It is their unpredictability, their courage, and their will. That is the true threat. That is what makes them terrifying. The alien officers sat in silence, absorbing the weight of the revelation. For centuries, they had prided themselves on superiority, on control, on strategy. Yet this one ship, one vessel crewed by humans, had shown them that raw determination and resilience could rival technology, numbers, and planning. The warship continued its slow journey across the stars, a silent sentinel of a species that refused to be broken. The humans aboard it did not boast or threaten. They merely existed, prepared for anything, ready to endure any challenge. And that simple existence, that quiet confidence, sent ripples of fear across the alien fleet. Valen finally turned to his officers. Record every detail. Study their biology, their tactics, their history. Learn everything we can. Humanity is not to be underestimated. And mark this, we do not provoke them. We do not test them. We survive by understanding them, respecting them, and preparing for the day we might meet them under different circumstances. The officers nodded silently, the gravity of the orders clear. The projection of the human warship faded slowly as it continued its path, vanishing into the distant starfield. And even as the Zaranth fleet followed its own path away from the human vessel, the image of the humans, their endurance, their resilience, their unyielding will, remained vivid in every officer's mind. The message was undeniable. The galaxy contained a species unlike any other, not because of their weapons, their numbers, or their technology, but because of something far more fundamental, something the Zaranth had never encountered, the human spirit. Valen exhaled slowly, the tension in his body finally easing just slightly. He allowed himself a thought he had never spoken aloud. Humanity was not merely a species. They were a force of nature. And the galaxy, he realized, might never be prepared for them. The bridge lights dimmed slightly, the hum of the Zaranth flagship echoing in the quiet. The report to the High Council was complete, the data meticulously recorded. Yet even with all the information, all the analysis, a single truth remained. Humans could not be predicted. Humans could not be measured. Humans endured. And the thought of that endurance, that quiet, unstoppable will, left the Zaranth officers with a feeling they had never known before. Fear. Not of battle, not of weapons, not of conquest, but fear of a species that refused to be broken. The human warship moved on, unaware of the alien eyes that had scanned it. The galaxy continued in silence around it, and for the first time the Zaranth knew a truth that could not be ignored. Humanity was coming. And when they did, they would not merely arrive, they would endure, and they would prevail, and the galaxy would take notice.